Hey, this time you are looking at what is, at present, my favorite weapon that I've ever held. It's a Japanese Naginata. Naginata is a halberd, polearm type weapon from Japan. Kind of the classic. Broad strokes, you'd say Naginata, kind of a long polearm weapon with a curved blade, and Yari with a straight blade. Again, grossly oversimplifying, those would be the two main branches of Japanese samurai staff-bladed weapons. These started to become, their own thing. There was obviously long weapons before that, but around 1100 AD or CE. This one here is old. I don't know how old, but it's in just pristine condition. It had a surprise in store, too. As soon as I saw it, it took me aback a little bit because, here we go, you can see the length. This is much shorter than what you usually think of. And that really changes the weapon in a way, and it also suits kind of my sparring style that I really like, so it's just really amazed. So here you go. See the one on the left there, the Naginata? That's more what you usually see, and that is a very long weapon. And you're maximizing your reach advantage, and the guy with the sword can't reach you, but you can reach him. You're on horseback, or you're trying to bring a man down from horseback. They're used both ways, etc., etc. The length makes sense, but that means you need a lot of room to operate. And this one right here does not do that. And this one you would use almost as a really long-handled sword, if that makes any sense. You can see the simple wood-on-wood decor, that they went for here, the handle and sheath when they come together, and that's my favorite design when it comes to katanas, and never saw one like this in Naginata using the same thing, so I like that about it too. I think it's just incredibly elegant. Naginatas stand out for several reasons within the history of Japanese martial arts. One is that, unlike the katana, which was strictly associated with the samurai class, these were not, and they had kind of various groups that they were associated with. So the original, probably the first, were warrior monks. There's some controversy about that, but whatever. Warrior monks, and then specifically, or even more so, with women users. Before we move off from the handle here, notice it's got a very kind of flattened oblong shape. It's not round the way you'd think of most staff weapons being. I think that feels just fantastic in the hand. And yes, I did pick this up and do a few moves before, sadly, relinquishing it. One source I read says that you should think of these as being used in conjunction with the bow, which is the yumi, for the samurai. Samurai warfare went through various stages. It wasn't always the same. So, from what at least this source said, think of a time when it was very archery heavy, and then in that time the Naginata was predominant, whereas in other times when archery diminished in importance, so did the Naginata. So it wasn't necessarily that you would commonly find a Naginata versus a katana in battle. Here you can see the level of detail that went into that bracket. It's the only part of the entire weapon that has any kind of ornamentation, so it's a very restrained aesthetic overall. You can also see how thick that spine is, the blade is. So this is a strong blade. You're going to use a Naginata against someone in armor, so it's got to be able to put up with a bashing. I'm sure there was variation, just like with katanas, but this one here in particular was built to be sharp, but very sturdy. Just like in the West, men did the fighting most of the time, but unlike in the West, say like with the chivalric tradition, here women really had a weapon that they were expected to train and be able to fight with, and it was the Naginata. This is the weapon samurai women were expected to use to defend the home, for instance, if it was invaded while the man was not there. The association continued into modernity, and in 1912 this became part of standard public school education for women, for girls. This being around the time that Japanese martial arts kind of went from jitsu to do, and, more about a meditative, self-improvement exercise. Now let's move on to the blade. Beautiful blade. It's got the classic shape, and you can see this was made by a master craftsman. You can see the wavy pattern there, the hamon, however that should be pronounced, and you can see it's very clear, easy to spot. It's got this nice gentle wave to it. Sometimes they change a lot. It's kind of the swordmaker's signature, and really the hallmark of Japanese swordsmiths. So the blade here is it was 15, I think maybe 15.5 inches. Like I said, it was sturdy, and you're going to see that in a second, but also quite sharp. You almost think of it as a elongated axe. Now, that might sound confusing. Axes could actually be sharper than swords. We don't think of them that way at all, but they could be because they had much more material behind them. A friend of mine taught me that. So, again, think of this as a really long, thin axe blade in the sense that it's sturdy enough to chop, but still quite sharp. And you can see that this blade has just really clearly defined features, right? Like the ridges, the different surfaces, the lines of demarcation, the fuller, or so-called blood groove there. It's just everything really pops on it. And the other thing you can see is why this caught on so much, right? You can slice with one side, stab with the point, and hook with the back. So isn't that a great look? Look at that. You might not have noticed that or realized it. So you see that kind of diamond cross-section there. So it fattens out right where you're going to come into contact, right? So it's strengthening the cutting portion when it hits hardest, and it's strengthening the tip there. Look at that tip. That's just amazing. I like it so much that we're going to do a close-up on it. It's just an absolute work of art. Look at that deadly, just pristine point. Of course, you lose some efficiency on the thrust because of the curvature of the blade, but that's the sacrifice that this and, say, like the katana design make. This weapon overall, by the way, gained popularity during the, I have no idea how to pronounce this, the Genpei War, late 12th century, and that heavily involved Yoshitsune Minamoto, who I have a separate video on, because I saw a sculpture of him. So right about now, I'm completely regretting not buying this. I would have had to sell most of my weapon collection to then do it or pay for it after acquiring it, but I should have done it. You can see the lint is really the only thing on the steel that you would need to remove for it to look just absolutely picture perfect. Now, I've taken a lot of pictures of weapons over the years, long before I started this YouTube channel. This here is one of my absolute favorite. I love the way the light just caught it. And that encapsulates, I think, the very Japanese aesthetic about it. You know, the simplicity, the elegance, the deadliness, just absolutely everything. Couldn't look better, in my opinion. So, that is this particular Naginata, which, to backtrack a little bit, again, is particularly short. So, more of a close quarters sword with a long handle than long polearm with a short sword on the end of it, Naginata. And they say Naginata shafts were between 3 and 4 feet, and this one would be like about 3 feet, like the size of a typical sword blade. The 4 feet sounds kind of crazy to me. You can easily find pictures where it's much longer than that. Well, the only part of the weapon we have not yet covered in loving detail is the sheath. So here it is. And it's just as beautiful as the rest of the weapon. Again, I love just the simple wood-on-wood look. And you can see it's got quite a bit of kanji on it, and unfortunately I don't know what it says, and neither did the dealer. I hope you enjoyed seeing this magnificent version of a classic samurai weapon, the Naginata. Thanks.